Good evening, third period. Just let's go over a couple things real quick. W.B. Du Bois, actually, these two slides, no, this slide, excuse me, I started making them yesterday, and then we decided not to do this quiz this morning and just focus on the debate. So some things might have, been supplemented already based on what we talked about today. And a lot was discussed. It was a good debate, I thought. A little bit different. I would have liked more people to get involved, but next time we'll do that. So. This came up as one of the reflection pieces 2 days ago. I know we didn't have that many, but I thought just, I'll throw these questions out. To what extent does it hurt Du Bois' credibility? He left the country for Ghana. I mean, he's 90 when he does that. At this point, does he still have a campaign to address at that point? Probably not. Which of the individuals had a bigger community or a bigger following was the question. I just think that we can really answer that right now. I think the idea, this was something that was actually asked today. And it's an important question. I don't know if there's any numbers to back it up. I don't know if there's anything we can actually use in that sense, but the idealists would follow Du Bois. They would want something right now, and they have a right to feel that way. Without doubt. There's always an idealist, there's always a realist. And in this case, Du Bois is the idealist, and the realist is Washington. Booker T. Washington, thinking more realistically, and given the context of history right now, I would say he is the bigger following. But that's just my guess. A lot of people have been mentioning that, Du Bois being a communist. I don't know if this is really a big deal, except that maybe later on in history, if you want to talk about McCarthyism, as I think Maria brought up in class at one point, you might want to talk about that point. That's maybe why he leaves the country, right? Something I think Maria also mentioned. But the idea that he's a communist now, really, we don't care about that right now. We'll care about it later. And it might be good outside information later on if you want to, include some big names that became communists. These big names that became communists. How can blacks achieve or preserve their voting rights? The one thing I can think of right now is that voters are always an important commodity, and what I wrote was that now, the Republican Party's lost 2 elections recently to the Democrats, and a big part of that is the fact or a lack of Hispanic support, Hispanic votes. And the reality is that because immigration is such a big topic and a big concern for the Hispanic American community, I would not be surprised to see Republican support for that. It's just something that you can kind of see the dots sort of connecting in that way. So if you take that back into history, the context of history, there will definitely be a period where the black vote, and there already has been, right? But it's important right now. Even in the South, it will become important again, and they will start to release some of that pressure that they're putting on through all these poll taxes, literacy tests, and things like that. And boycott's really the way to do it. I'm actually going to come back to the violence part. You might have already looked at the PowerPoint I put up already, but let's skip to some of the elements of pages 547 and 552. Gilded Age, right, quoted by Mark Twain. One of the American obsession with wealth at this point is a word called consumption, and conspicuous consumption is a term we should be mentioning. Now, people are, not really yet in the 1920s, excuse me, but even at this part, spending. Now we're starting to get to the point where we have more time, and with time comes more leisure. If you want to spend things on moving pictures, right, not really movies yet, but that's sort of the introduction to this, to chapter 18. And then I just wrote, how does this affect American priorities? So keep that in the back of your mind. That's such cool. All right. Which industries can be classified as post-Bellum? Textbook just very simply, almost too simply, guys. The petroleum, which we think of oil, steel, and meatpacking. Now, the first two we should think about straight industry and building. To build anything, you need steel, you need petroleum. Railroad tracks, you need steel. Skyscrapers, you need steel. So building is happening. So there's simple 3 ideas, but what do they actually mean? Right? Being analytical like you guys are so good at. All right. So what is the significance of the statement on page 550? And what I'm talking about there is the second paragraph, I believe. In the end, it says by 1910, a million patents have been issued in the United States. Patents have been given by the government that secures your creation, your invention, your innovation. And I think the number there really speaks a lot about why America is a major technology innovator, that they're really creating new things. So, in the back of your mind. All right. Yep. Why is research and development so important during the Gilded Age? All these research and development companies are coming about, right? All these different groups, right? Edison, and so on and so forth. And what do we need to keep these things organized, structured, and course, funded? How do we pay for research and development? How do we pay for the creation of these new inventions and innovations, right? They had come about during the Gilded Age. And that is the corporation. And that the corporation is how you address those questions, that question. So what is the key feature of a corporation? Ownership is separate from management. What does it actually mean? And what are the advantages of it? The things I'm going to ask you tomorrow. And what actually is an advantage of incorporating your business? This is what's happening a lot. Right? I included the PowerPoint. I did a portion of it. I didn't include the whole thing. I just put some things up that might help us address a little more of that corporation. Let's go back to this idea of violence that came up today. I just went on a tear and started typing a lot of stuff. You can read it on your own. But again, public apology to Steve. Kind of jumped down your throat. I felt bad about that right afterwards. The point is, guys, that having said that, this paragraph, and read it on your own time, of course, read it or whatever you want to do. It's on the PowerPoint too. And it comes down to this statement here. Where's counter-historical? This is the best way to look at it. I can't find it. Counter-historical. Okay. What I mean by that is that everything we know about American history in general, but particularly American history for us right now, is that we've created a system under the Bill of Rights and the Constitution that allows for freedom to be able to move about and protest and move those things. And we've seen that has been the most successful way to change things. If we reduce all of that to pulling a trigger or hitting somebody or it might be, despite what we've seen in clips, and Steve's mentioning, he's right, 1960s, 50s, and prior to that, unfortunately even after that, right, you have situations where police would use fire hoses to break up some kind of protest or it might be. But you understand that a lot of those things that they were breaking up were actually peaceful protests. So unfortunately, the violence was on the part of the whites there. You know, the people that were trying to hold things back, not change or improve things, which might be, I think, helpful enough. And I put a bunch of different examples here. I just thought it really needed to be addressed after that, and a lot of people were asking about it in the reflection pieces too. And just something for us to look at. Really read this, what I have here, okay, and PowerPoint too. But just keep back in mind, guys, that violence. I'm not saying this in a way that like this is my only belief. Violence is not an answer. The point is that, and you write about this. It just sounds real. Sounds real. For all we know, I mean, all these things. Look at all these things I listed here, right? It means it looks like. I mean, if you write it, right, it looks like you're ignoring all these things that have happened. Embargoes, free produce, Phil Rowe, of course. These political parties that have come up just to stop something from happening without resorting to violence, right? A political party that's just about violence is actually an army. That's all it is, right? That's not what we're about. So, and a Supreme Court case, of course. I mean, that's where we solve a lot of these problems. So no. I mean, with anything we've looked at, we could use that as an example of what not to do. I mean, Jackson used the army to push Native Americans west when the Supreme Court said you can't do that. That's an example of how this doesn't work, right? Because if anything, now in history, we look at that as a wrong action on the part of, morally wrong, politically wrong, constitutionally wrong on the part of Jackson. So just be very careful when you phrase that kind of stuff, okay? I'll see you tomorrow morning.